Rainbow Six Siege. Somehow this multiplayer that has nothing to do with its predecessors has been Ubisoft's most successful multiplayer ever. And even now, 5 years after the game has released, it still hangs up there with the most popular games. This game never seems to go away. Now, believe it or not, before I started playing tons of single player games, this was my go-to. All the memories of coming home from school, booting up the Xbox. Remember those things? Could you imagine if anyone still uses those? But the game I would always go to is Rainbow Six Siege. I was so invested in this game that I really badly wanted to go into esports, but stupid Ubisoft put an age restriction on esports. Stupid Ubisoft. All I had to do was lie about my age. But anyways, this is by far the most I have ever played a game. I put around 2,000 hours on the game on Xbox, and then I switched to PC a few years back, and it's my most played game on Steam as well. Now, why is it that me and so many other players can play this game for so long and not get tired of it? The answer is, I do get tired of it. My relationship with Rainbow Six Siege was amazing. We were best friends, but now the relationship has become toxic and abusive. I've probably yelled "this game sucks" more than I can count, and yet for some reason, I still play it. There's just something about Siege. I don't know if it's the consistency of the gunplay or just a ranking system that taunts you and makes you want to grind the game so you can spit in its face and claim that champion. At least this was often the case for me. Siege kind of reminds me of my ex-girlfriend. I want nothing more than to throw it in the trash and never look back at its stupid face again, and then I come back a few months later and become addicted to it. I'm just kidding, guys. I don't have an ex-girlfriend. But let's go over why exactly Siege has lived for so long and still persuades players like me to come back to it, and why it may convince some of you to buy it for the first time. For starters, updates and new content. This has to be a record for Ubisoft because there's no way they've supported any other game for this long, and it's actually really paying off for them. And I know I like to make fun of Ubisoft a lot, but Rainbow Six is a game they can really be proud of, and the fact that it's one of the most played games for nearly 5 years is extremely commendable. But about every 3 months, this game receives new operators with new gadgets and sometimes a new map. This is obviously not a very cheap task for Ubisoft, and you can tell they've started to get a little lazy. I remember back in the good old days of year one, I used to count the days until the new season because each season introduced new guns, maps, and operators that completely shook up how the game was played and the meta of the time. Unfortunately though, the game is now nearing 60 total operators, so the creativity and big shakeup with each season is really starting to diminish. I mean, a lot of the new operators being added are just reskinned versions of already established operators. I mean, the operators don't even receive new guns anymore, and their gadgets are either straight up rip-offs of another operator or like a weird hybrid between two already existing operators. Which is crazy because I still think there is so much more room for cool and unique ops. I mean, they were so out of ideas that they decided, hey, you know how everyone wants a new Splinter Cell game and have been begging for one for nearly a decade? Yeah. Well, instead of that, let's make Sam Fisher our next newest operator. Wow, man, what a great idea. You're a genius. And I thought they would at least give Sam Fisher some cool night vision and maybe the ability to turn off the lights, but nah, attacking version of Valkyrie. It's to the point where the game is getting a little too overwhelming, and there's so many operators that you sometimes can't even remember who does what and who counters what. It makes me miss simpler times. Remember these guys? Oh, and who could forget ACOG on Jaeger, Bandit, and Ash? These days, hardly anybody has ACOG. Now, I understand why a lot of you are glad that those days are gone, and I do think the game is more balanced now than it was a few years ago, but sometimes playing with overpowered weapons or gadgets is what made the game fun. Except for Blackbeard, who's probably the stupidest operator ever created. But I mean, look at Modern Warfare 2, for example. That game was broken and unbalanced beyond belief, yet to many people, it is still their favorite Call of Duty game because that unbalanced stuff is just part of the fun. Ubisoft also removed a lot of my favorite maps from Ranked. Maps like Plane, House, even Yacht and Favelas. And yes, the maps aren't balanced, but they were so much fun to play, and it's what made the Ranked experience so much fun. And yet for Ubisoft making all these balancing changes, they often break the game more than fix it with some of these changes. Explain to me why they continue to make changes to operators like Jaeger, Ella, and Buck. Operators who have been balanced for a while. Yet operators like Castle, who have absolutely useless and weak abilities and weapons, regions haven't received any balancing changes or updates since the game first released. And it's not only the operators, it's the maps too. Almost every map rework Ubisoft has done has been complete garbage. Hereford Base and House were great examples of maps people like and Ubisoft decided to change and completely ruin. My favorite map, Chalet, which was completely fine and balanced as it was and had been in the ranked and esports rotation for years, somehow ended up the victim of a rework and now the map is trash. So Ubisoft, how about instead of reworking maps that are already balanced and people enjoy, how about you rework the maps that people hate and never want to play? That being said, despite a lot of questionable and in my opinion stupid updates and changes, they have not managed to kill Rainbow Six yet, and it still remains as one of the best multiplayer shooter games you can play with friends and dump endless amount of hours into. The skill gap is increasingly getting larger and players continue to get better, but there's still plenty of ways to get a comfortable start and learn the ropes while playing against other inexperienced players. That is, unless you get destroyed by a Diamond Smurf account. Yeah, by the way, this community is very toxic.
Wait, is there like an 8-year-old talking shit to you right now?
Yeah, he's like, you're using controller.
Oh,
Sin's got 2 more kills than me and he's talking shit.
it does it not matter?
The one who said free.
Talking shit, buddy.
Rumor has it you're a nigger.
I blame this round on Danny.
Shut the fuck up.
And I haven't played for 3 months.
Negative
And I haven't played for 3 months.
Dude, this dude is so
This
weird,
guy's
bro.
ridiculous.
What is he saying? I had
Yeah, GG's though. Sturby's a weirdo, confirmed.
So be prepared as a new player to be bullied and ridiculed like we once were. And yet, if you can find a consistent group of 4 friends to play the game with, then that's when it's at its best and it's a lot of fun to play. I would also really like to point out that the game is often really cheap, and even without a sale, it's still up for a relatively cheap price, so why not give it a try if you haven't yet? Meanwhile, I'll still be struggling and trying to fight my way to Diamond. Someone please carry me.